Welcome everyone to the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor. This video is part of a series that I like to call a fireside pitch, in which I share you some creative storytelling ideas that I have in mind for a particular series or a franchise, or in this case, a character. I've done a lot of movie reviews on this channel, but I figure I would challenge myself a little bit to come up with a story idea of my own. I think to myself, what if I was in charge of rebooting or remaking a popular movie or TV series or adapting a particular character that I enjoy? What would I do if I was in charge of making a movie or a series? It's easy to be an armchair quarterback and critique, a movie or a show that already exists, but what kind of story would I tell if I was left to my own devices? Well, we're about to find out. I wanted to do this video for a while because one of my favorite characters in all of comics is Dick Grayson. Dick Grayson is the original Robin. He's the Robin that everybody knows. He was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane in April 1940. He first appeared in Detective Comics number 38, which was just 1 year after Batman's first appearance. Undoubtedly the most well-known sidekick of all time, Dick Grayson, like I said, is the Robin that everyone knows. Depending on how old you are, he has been most famously portrayed in live action by Burt Ward in the 1966 Batman TV show opposite Adam West. However, there's a lot more to this character than, a silly outfit and, holy rusted metal Batman or whatever his catchphrases might have been. Dick Grayson has gone through a lot of character growth and evolution in the over 80 years that he's existed. So, in the comics, Dick eventually grew older and led his own team of young heroes called the Teen Titans. Now, by the early 1980s, Teen Titans was a massively popular comic book series under the direction of writer Marv Wolfman and the artist George Perez, rest in peace, and editor Len Wein. Wolfman and Perez thought that Dick Grayson had grown so much as a character by that point and was so important to their Titan series, they decided that the character should primarily be the leader of the Titans and not necessarily Batman's partner anymore. The only problem was that DC insisted that Batman and Robin should not split up. That's an iconic duo, the dynamic duo, Batman and Robin. They didn't really want to split Batman and Robin up, so they weren't sure how to do it. But eventually the decision was made that Dick Grayson had outgrown his role as Robin and took on the identity of Nightwing. The identity of Nightwing made his debut in Tales of the Teen Titans number 44 in July of 1984, during one of my favorite storylines, the Judas Contract. It's really a great story. I definitely recommend you picking it up. They've adapted it a few times. There was an animated movie, the Teen Titans Judas Contract, but I think the book is really great. So I definitely recommend that if you get the chance. While all this was happening, a new Robin, Jason Todd, was introduced. Now, as a kid, I was such a fan of Dick Grayson as Robin that when I was young, I thought that he should have kept the Robin name and just gone solo. But seeing how the character had evolved, and as well as how they introduced the Robins that came after Dick Grayson, it definitely made sense. So there have even been points in the comics where Dick has taken over as Batman at certain points when Bruce Wayne was missing, or presumed dead or whatever reason. So yeah, kind of coming full circle. Like he actually grew up and even became Batman for a little bit. But he went out. But Nightwing was really like his own thing. He kind of established himself that way, and I thought that was really cool. You don't really see a lot of that character growth in the comics because most of the time everyone kind of stays the same age. So a little bit of history as far as Robin or Dick Grayson. He was first portrayed in live action by a guy named Douglas Croft in the Batman film serials in 1943, and in the 1949 Batman and Robin serial, he was played by Johnny Duncan. Like I mentioned before, Burt Ward famously played Robin in the 1966 Batman movie and the TV series that followed it. And in the 90s, you had Batman the Animated Series, which was fantastic, and he was voiced by Lauren Lester. And that show was the first adaptation outside of the comics that actually showed Dick Grayson's evolution from Robin into Nightwing. Around the same time, Chris O'Donnell played Robin, Dick Grayson, in 1995's Batman Forever and 1997's Batman and Robin. Looking back, though, it kind of seems like that version of Dick Grayson had a little bit more in common with Jason Todd's personality. Like he was a little edgier, a little more temperamental. But since then, we haven't, since the days of Chris O'Donnell, we haven't really seen all that much in the way of live action versions of any of the Robins. Although, in The Dark Knight Rises in 2012, you had a character named John Blake, who was played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who was sort of Christopher Nolan's take on Robin, but he was basically an original character, with sort of elements of Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, and Tim Drake thrown in. But it wasn't until recently, in 2018, when the Titans TV series, which was originally on the DC Universe app, now is on HBO Max, and I think also shows on TNT, some of the reruns, at least here in the States. But it wasn't until, yeah, like I said, it wasn't until the 2018 Titans series cast a guy named Brendan Thwaites as Dick Grayson, and that has been the first live action Dick Grayson, the first live action Dick Grayson to transition from Robin into Nightwing. And it also shows the first and so far the only live action adaptations of Jason Todd and Tim Drake. Hopefully it's not the last. Um, so yeah, so you're hearing me listen, and you're listening to me talk about all this stuff, and you're probably wondering why Robin, Dick Grayson in particular, is one of my favorite characters in comics. Now, obviously, I'm a diehard Superman and Batman guy. Anyone who knows me knows that this is the case. And in many ways, I feel like Dick embodies the best characteristics of both Batman and Superman. So, sort of like Batman, he doesn't have any powers. Instead, he's probably the most naturally gifted athlete in the entire DC universe, and undoubtedly one of the best acrobats in the DC universe. After all, he grew up in the circus. His family was flying trapeze artists, and he is second only to Batman in terms of detective skills and martial arts abilities. And personality-wise, though, I've always found Dick to be a little bit more relatable and down to earth than, even than Batman, even than Bruce Wayne. Bruce is sort of a darker character. He's not exactly a people person. Uh, but Dick was always the natural counterbalance to that, and I think that's why that pairing worked so well. And in most incarnations, Dick is more charismatic. He's more affable, friendly, witty, and arguably one of the best natural leaders in the DC universe. He's very good at leading a team. No, he's not perfect or one-dimensional. His relationship with Bruce has been complicated over the years. Um, but it's hard not to like the guy. Plus, like I said, his character has grown and evolved over the years in a way that very few get to. From being a kid sidekick to being an adult, to being his own man. Like I said, most of these characters sort of stay the same age through decades and decades, and Dick actually got to grow up, which is pretty cool. Which Yeah, and I think it would be cool to see a movie, like a coming of age movie about him becoming Nightwing. So so that brings us to the DCEU. Now, as I'm recording this, it's January of 2023. Depending on what day it is, there's always something new happening with the DC films or the DCEU. Um, as I record this, currently James Gunn is in charge of DC Films, and with Matt Reeves's Batman, the Batman series with Robert Pattinson. Now that that's a thing, it kind of seems like it's a moot point to talk about introducing Dick Grayson and the other Robins into the DCEU. And I'm talking about like opposite Ben Affleck's Batman, and I'm talking about the DCEU with Justice League and Man of Steel and Wonder Woman and all that stuff. So, unfortunately, it kind of looks like the DCEU is sort of on death's door at this point in time. But for the sake of argument, I wanted to take a look at what we know about Robin in the DCEU so far. So, let's look at that current crop of DC movies. In the 2017 theatrical version of the Justice League movie, there's a scene where Commissioner Gordon is talking to Batman, and he said, "It's good to see you playing well with others," which I kind of took, excuse me, I kind of took it as Gordon acknowledging that Batman had a history of having partners, and in Batman versus Superman, we see a Robin suit in a display case in the Batcave with the Joker's spray paint on it, which sort of suggests that one of the Robins had been murdered by the Joker. And this was also briefly mentioned in the 2016 Suicide Squad movie, suggesting that Harley Quinn had a role in the death of Robin. They didn't go into too many details about what that was, but and Robin was also directly mentioned in the future in that future scene at the very end of Zack Snyder's Justice League, by the Joker, where he talked about Batman losing an adopted son. So, but so far that's all we know about Robin in the DCEU. He's nowhere to be found in any of the other movies. Now, Zack Snyder mentioned in interviews that he considered the Robin that was killed to be Dick Grayson, not Jason Todd. But that was never officially confirmed in any of the movies. And personally, I think that would be a big mistake to kill Dick Grayson and not Jason Todd, because in the comics, it was Jason who was the one who got killed by the Joker. And then later on, he got brought back as the Red Hood, but that's a whole other ball of wax we could get into. In my mind, the Robin that is apparently dead in the DCEU is and should be Jason Todd. Although this raises a few important questions. Where exactly has Dick Grayson been during the events of Batman versus Superman and Justice League? When we're first introduced to the DCEU's Batman, Ben Affleck, played by Ben Affleck, I should say, in Batman versus Superman, they say that Bruce has been on the job. He's been on the job 20 years. He's been Batman for a while, and he's in a very low emotional state, even for Batman, even by Batman standards. Alfred is still there, of course, but there's no sign of Dick Grayson or Barbara Gordon. Now, it's not unreasonable to think that Bruce and Dick might have had some sort of falling out, and that Dick is no longer living in Gotham, sort of as in the comics. And at the same time, we don't see Barbara Gordon, who was, of course, Batgirl. She might have been shot and paralyzed by the Joker at this point, which that happened in the comics as well, which effectively ended her career as Batgirl for a long time. She later became Oracle. Either way, we haven't seen or heard from her in the DCEU yet either. And we'll never know for sure if, I know there was that Batgirl movie that was recently canceled, that they filmed a lot of stuff for. I don't know if that was supposed to take in the DC. I don't know if that was supposed to take place in the DCEU or not. They never really confirmed that either way. And now that it's canceled, I don't know if we'll ever know what the story with that was. But I believe the best way to introduce Dick Grayson into the DCEU would be to make a Nightwing Year One movie. Basically, it's the ultimate coming of age story. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about there, and sort of what I wanted to pitch in this movie, a Nightwing Year One movie. I always imagine a movie like that opening with, Dick either driving a car or a motorcycle somewhere on a desert road, and maybe with some sort of voiceover. And you're not sure where he's going at first, but you hear him sort of reflecting on his life and his unusual upbringing. At some point, the camera would show that Dick is pulling up to a circus tent in a rural field somewhere, with the sign display for Haley's Circus. That was the circus where Dick grew up and performed with his parents, John and Mary Grayson, the Flying Graysons. They were acrobats, trapeze artists, and from there, you could cut to several flashbacks and montages going over key points in Dick's life, like as a child in the circus, performing with his parents, until they were eventually murdered by Tony Zuko. And after that happened, he was adopted by Bruce Wayne and eventually trained to become the first Robin. You could also have a montage of several of Batman and Robin's adventures through the years, which could also serve as a way to introduce several DCEU versions of Batman's classic rogues gallery. I think in Justice League they mentioned that they had already dealt with the Penguin, but you could see like Two Face and the Riddler and Killer Croc, and yeah, we actually saw Killer Croc in the Suicide Squad. So, but eventually you could reveal the real reason why Batman and Robin split up. Um, Now, as far as I know, there's not like one definitive reason over across all the various adaptations why Bruce and Dick parted ways. In the pre-Crisis comics, Dick simply felt that he had outgrown the role as Robin, and that Robin should stay being Batman's partner slash protege, while Dick created his own identity. Now, in the post-Crisis comics, by this I mean Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was a big event in 1985. Um, if you're not sure what that is, look up Crisis on Infinite Earths, and you'll know what I'm talking about. But in the post-Crisis comics, Bruce fires Dick. I should say, yeah, he fires Dick because he gets shot in the shoulder by the Joker, and Bruce was concerned about Dick's safety, and you know, it, in other stories, Bruce had fired Dick because he felt that Dick was losing focus due to because he was balancing college and being the leader of the Teen Titans. That was actually the explanation that was given in this. This was a really cool story that came out in the 2000s. It was a Nightwing Year One, written by Chuck Dixon, who I think was the creator of Tim Drake, the third Robin. But yeah, this was a really great story. And in this book, they said that Dick was Robin, but he was just, Bruce just felt like he wasn't focused, and decided to let him go, and they had a huge falling out because of it. In the animated series in the '90s, um, which first was that story was first written by Hilary J. Bader, I think was the writer, but that was first in the Batman Adventures comics, which was like a tie-in. Um, and they also showed it in the series. There's an episode of the Batman animated series called Old Wounds, where they sort of flash back to what happened. But sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So yeah, I think in the animated series, Dick quit as Robin because Bruce had added Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, to the team officially, and put her in danger without discussing it with him. And he was pretty angry that Bruce had figured out Barbara's identity as Batgirl without telling him about it. And and Dick and Barbara were a couple at that one point. They had this blossoming romance, but they didn't really share that part of their lives with each other. Um, but once Dick found out about it, that was the last straw, and he left. He actually punched Batman in the face. It was pretty wild. Um, Yeah, and in the Titans series on HBO Max, Dick leaves Bruce and goes out on his own, but keeps the Robin suit. Like he's still Robin on his own until he meets Jason Todd, who Bruce had already replaced him with. So you had two Robins for a stretch there. So there are a lot of different ways you could tackle that. But whatever the reason might be in this hypothetical Nightwing Year One movie, it's probably safe to assume that in the DCEU, chances are that Batman and Robin split was not a friendly one. Like it wasn't very amicable because like I said, he's nowhere to be found in any of these other movies, and Bruce is depressed and drinking, and well, if you've seen Batman versus Superman, you know how he acts in that one. So it could be, as far as a reason for them splitting up, it could be as simple as Dick, coming into his own and not wanting to take any orders from Bruce anymore. There could be several reasons for him not wanting to be Robin anymore. And so, in a movie like this, you could have several scenes of Dick traveling the world, much like Bruce Wayne did as a young man, learning several new detective skills, martial arts techniques, crime fighting methods, maybe studying with different masters and senseis all over the world. Like that could be kind of cool to see. But maybe he's not really sure what he wants to do with his life. He doesn't know if he wants to be a masked crime fighter anymore. He knows that he doesn't want to be like Bruce, but he can't help but feeling that he should be doing something to help people. And yeah, that could, like I said, you could build a lot with that. And using flashbacks like that is a good tool in movies to tell like a non-linear have like a non-linear story or a timeline. But I guess like the main, quote unquote present day plot would revolve around Dick reconnecting with Haley Circus, which which could be falling on some hard times financially. That was a story inspired by one of my favorite comic book storylines, which is called A Lonely Place of Dying. That was also done by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. It was like late 1988, 1989, and it was actually the story that introduced Tim Drake. But I wouldn't necessarily introduce Tim Drake at this point in the timeline. I feel like there's a lot going on, and we could definitely get to Tim later on in future hypothetical movies. But in Nightwing Year One, I wouldn't introduce Tim Drake in it. But in this story, that was how Tim Drake tracked down Dick and Bruce and figured out the secret. But yeah, there was a subplot in here about how Dick went back to Haley's circus, and while I was gonna say, yeah, he actually in that story, Dick actually helped the circus come out of bankruptcy because he ended up becoming co-owner of the circus, which I thought would make a lot of sense. He'd probably Dick would probably still be doing pretty well financially from all those years of living with Bruce Wayne. Plus, in the animated series, they'd said that he had like a trust fund and life insurance policy that he cashed out on when he turned 18. So yeah, you could do a lot with that. Like maybe while Dick is there, helping out with the circus, he can't help but notice that Haley Circus is suffering more than just financial distress. He could meet with several of the circus performers and sort of learn that many of them are being hired and heavily recruited into some organized criminal activity, which could range from all kinds of things, from petty theft to industrial espionage, and even assassinations. Now, this could inspire Dick to once again use his detective skills and investigate who's behind this recruitment of circus performers and all these other people with special skills. Maybe that could eventually lead him back to Gotham, only to find out that this organization, or I say the organization behind this, is the Court of Owls. The Court of Owls, I should say. The Court of Owls is a criminal organization and a secret society that was created by a writer named Scott Snyder and artist Greg Capullo, and that first appeared in Batman Volume 2, number 6, in February of 2012. Now, I admit, I haven't read a ton of the comics in Scott Snyder's run, but from what I understand, the Court of Owls are a secret society of wealthy elites in Gotham who utilize special assassins known as Talons to eliminate their enemies. I think, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like the Skull and Bones Society, or like you've heard about stories like that, or I think that was a movie at one point, and I think there was that Stanley Kubrick movie Eyes Wide Shut, which was pretty weird, but like it talked about corrupt stuff like that with like these like super wealthy people who wore masks and whatnot. So, um, but yeah, so but the Court of Owls uses like these assassins, like genetically modified people called Talons, to eliminate their enemies. Um, but yeah, I always thought that was an interesting premise because especially given that Bruce Wayne comes from this old money family in Gotham, but thankfully the Waynes have not directly been involved with the Court of Owls, as far as I know. Again, I'm not an expert on that storyline, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But I did read one story about how the Court of Owls connects to Nightwing. That was that the story that I had read basically revealed that the Talons, these assassins, are basically like reanimated corpses, and that one of the Talons was Dick's great grandfather, William Cobb. Yeah, they were getting into like zombies and stuff with the Court of Owls. That's kind of when I checked out of the storyline. Honestly, it's like I feel like you got enough interesting stuff there without having to throw zombies into the mix. But I digress. Um, you know. But apparently William Cobb was also a circus performer, and apparently the Court of Owls had targeted, circus and sideshow performers as candidates for to be these sleeper agents. Like I said, the whole zombie assassin thing, that's a little out there for my taste when it comes to Batman. Look, I know it's the DC, I know it's the DC universe, and in a world where you have the Lazarus Pits and Ra's al Ghul, where those things are, where Ra's al Ghul is a thing. I mean, it's certainly plausible, but like I said, I feel like the Court of Owls and the Talons, they're interesting enough without having to go to the without going the zombie route. But I digress. Along the way, you could have different flashbacks to different events in Dick's life, especially during his travels around the world. The things that inspire him to take up the symbol and the mantle of Nightwing. It would be kind of wild to see him consider putting the Robin suit back on at one point, but only to read like an article or see some sort of report about Batman and a new Robin, who we know is Jason Todd, working together in Gotham recently, much to Dick's surprise and irritation. And I could see him being a little upset about that. I could also see Dick reconnecting with Barbara Gordon while he's on this case, even if it's just like a chance meeting or a phone call. I always thought their relationship was really interesting, and yeah, I personally feel like Dick and Barbara should end up together as a couple. But I do like the idea of them being friends at first, but maybe reluctant to take the next step in their relationship for whatever reason. Maybe maybe he likes her, or but maybe he's too scared to say something, or maybe vice versa. Batman the Animated Series actually suggested that there was a bit of a love triangle between Dick, Barbara, and Bruce. And a lot of people didn't like the idea of Barbara and Bruce getting together, but it kind of makes sense to me that Barbara might have feelings for Bruce and vice versa at some point, especially given how often they work together. But I do agree that those two should not end up together, at least not for very long. Now, granted, Dick he's had his share of romances in the comics as well, most notably Starfire, Princess Coriander. But I've personally always been a fan of the Dick and Babs relationship. I know in the comics they've come close to being engaged a couple of times, but it never lasted. I mean, I don't know why they don't just pull the trigger in the comics with it. Get these two married already. Come on, you cowards, do it. Talking to you comic book writers. But anyways, um, and also since the Titans, the Teen Titans, aren't really a thing in the DCEU. Um, I was thinking, could it be possible that Dick has crossed paths with some of those characters at some point? Um, I know in the comics, the original Teen Titans were Dick as Robin, and also were Kid Flash, Wally West, Wonder Girl, Donna Troy, which is Diana's little sister, Speedy, Roy Harper, he was the sidekick for Green Arrow, and Aqualad, Garth. Um, we've already seen Cyborg, Victor Stone in the DCEU, of course played by Ray Fisher. Victor Stone was a student at Gotham State University. I mean, is it possible that Victor Stone and Dick Grayson crossed paths at some point? Maybe they were friends or classmates. Who knows? Um, when Batman versus Superman starts, we learn that Batman has been around for 20 years. It's possible that Oliver Queen has been Green Arrow for a long time, even though we haven't seen him yet. Maybe Dick Grayson and Roy Harper could have crossed paths at some point when they were young. I know Wally West, Donna Troy, and Garth would be a little trickier to figure out, under the current DCEU continuity, but there are certainly ways that they could be introduced as well. You never know. Um, Now, I know that's a lot of characters to cram into a Nightwing Year One movie, so I don't know if that would be the best place to introduce all those other characters, but they're a big part of Dick Grayson's history, and it would be cool to see them show up in the DCEU at some point, in my opinion. But I mean, ultimately, the main character arc in this would be Dick Grayson coming to terms with his place in the world as a crime fighter, and how he balances that with his personal life and the relationships with people like Bruce and Barbara and his other friends. Um, I doubt his relationship with Bruce would be resolved by the end of Nightwing Year One, unless you do some sort of flash forward to the events after the first Justice League movie, which is where we last saw Ben Affleck's Batman. And at that point, Bruce has sort of regained his hope in humanity and more or less returned to his old self. Maybe I think then we could probably possibly see him and Dick reconcile and reunite and sort of bury the hatchet. I'd also be curious to see just to learn where Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon were during the events of Man of Steel. Where General Zod and the Kryptonians made themselves known by broadcasting on every TV station and RSS feed on the planet. I feel like that would be a major global event in the DCEU that, it would be cool to see where all these other characters were when that was going on. We saw where Batman was when it happened. Um, so yeah, that's my idea for it. As far as casting, who would I cast in that role? You'd have to get that right. In the comics, Dick Grayson is considered to be one of the best athletes in the entire DC universe. Not to mention that he's consistently depicted as being incredibly charming, charismatic, and handsome. Like the ladies love this guy. Like he's the girls love him. So if I had to pick right now two actors, off the top of my head, with the right ages, to play Dick Grayson opposite Ben Affleck's Batman, I would choose either Taylor Lautner or Zac Efron. Taylor Lautner not only looks the part, but he's a legit martial artist as well. And, so he would add some physical credibility. And although the fact that Robert Pattinson, his co-star from in Twilight, is currently playing another version of Batman, albeit in a different continuity, that'd be a little too ironic, I think. Um, but you never know. Yeah, I feel like Zac Efron could do it as well, even though he doesn't look as much like Dick Grayson does in the comics. But Efron's a good actor, and I mean, he certainly physically is convincing. So there's that. I know in the canceled Batgirl movie, Leslie Grace had played Barbara. I like I said, I don't know if that movie was meant to be in the DCEU or if it was its own thing. I don't really know a lot about her, so I don't know. So I don't know if she would have been good in the role or not. Um, Casting Barbara Gordon, you'd have to get that right too. I would love to see her, with the red hair and all that. Maybe Emma Stone would probably be a pretty good choice for it. Maybe another actress that comes to mind for me might be like Alexandra Daddario. She was in, I think, Rampage with Dwayne Johnson. Um, she was actually in Baywatch with with Zac Efron, weirdly enough. But yeah, it would be kind of cool to see scenes of Ben Affleck too, reprising the role of Batman or Bruce Wayne, as well as cameos by Jeremy Irons as Alfred and J.K. Simmons as Jim Gordon. Um, if we wanted to see include Roy Harper, who is known as Speedy in the comics, but later grew up and had some different identities like Arsenal and Red Arrow. He's a very close friend of Dick's in the comics as well. So maybe as an adult, I could see someone like maybe Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad, maybe playing Roy Harper. Roy Harper has quite a history too. Like he was actually addicted to heroin at one point in the comics, but got clean. So he's definitely got some issues as well. Um, but yeah, so those are some ideas I had as far as how to introduce Nightwing and subsequently Barbara Gordon, the Court of Owls, and all these other DC related characters into the DCEU. Now, of course, the DCEU probably won't be a thing after Shazam: Fury of the Gods and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. After those movies come out, they'll probably go in a completely different direction, and probably the same thing for the Ezra Miller Flash movie, which I think is still happening. As far as I know, that's still coming out. Who knows? But all of this is speculation, and since I don't own these characters anyway, I'm not worried about other people stealing my ideas. So if someone at Warner Brothers hears this and likes some of my ideas and wants to use it, go for it. Um, yeah, that's what this is all about. But thank you guys for listening to this long. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you had any ideas for what a Nightwing Year One movie might be, whether it's DCEU or whether it's its own thing. Um, yeah, hopefully you guys like this whole pitch idea I had. I know I have I'm doing this all live, by the way. I don't really know much about video editing, so if I stumble over my words a few times, I apologize. But this is authentic. This is as real as it gets. So thank you guys for tuning in as always. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at jackxconnor. Like me on Facebook at facebook.com/jackconnormusic. You can feel free to check out my bands. I play in a rock band, Vertebreaker. Check us out at facebook.com/vertebreakerband and at New Divide, Linkin Park tribute band that I play bass for. Facebook.com/New Divide Band. And as always, keep that feedback coming. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, make sure you email me at, you can leave a comment here or email me at jackconnorpodcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet me with hashtag Phoenix Report. If you're listening to this on YouTube or Apple or any of the, any of the podcast platforms, make sure you subscribe, hit like or a notification bell, or leave a 5-star review if you're so inclined. Go back and listen to all the other episodes and share this with your friends, especially if they're DC fans as well. And I always appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll have all the links in the description. I really appreciate this, you guys. So thanks for tuning in. This has been the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor, and I'll catch you later.